I kissed my husband goodbye that morning, slipping a tiny USB drive between our lips, a final gift he'd never expect. By noon, I'd be divorced and penniless. By sunset, the world would know his empire was built on lies. But what he didn't know, I'd been playing a longer game all along. Before we dive into this story, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button if you've ever felt underestimated, invisible, or dismissed, and subscribe, because what I'm about to tell you will change the way you think about power, patience, and revenge. Trust me, you won't want to miss where this goes. My name doesn't matter anymore. What matters is who I was and who I became. 15 years ago, I was a junior accountant at a luxury hotel in Manhattan. I was good at my job, ambitious, and I had plans. Then Victor Rothwell walked into my office. He owned the hotel chain, and he needed someone to review some documents. He was magnetic, confident, and 20 years older than me. Within 6 months, we were married. Within a year, I'd quit my job. Within 5 years, I'd forgotten I ever had one. I became Mrs. Victor Rothwell. I wore designer dresses to charity galas. I smiled for photographers. I planned dinner parties for investors and politicians. I was the perfect wife, the perfect accessory to his perfect empire. And somewhere along the way, I stopped being myself. I stopped being the woman who understood balance sheets and could spot financial irregularities in minutes. I became someone who pretended not to understand business because that's what he wanted. That's what made him comfortable. The first crack appeared in year 5. I found a stack of documents in his study one night when I couldn't sleep. Offshore accounts, shell companies, names I didn't recognize connected to properties I'd never heard of. When I asked him about it the next morning, he laughed. He actually laughed. "Darling, you wouldn't understand. It's complex business structure. Don't worry your pretty head about it." I didn't push. Not then. But something shifted inside me that day. Year 7, I overheard a phone call. He was in his home office, door cracked open, voice tense. "We need to restructure the holdings before the audit. Move everything through the Cayman accounts. They can't trace it if we're careful." I stood outside that door, frozen, my heart pounding. Who was he hiding money from? Why did it need to be untraceable? I didn't confront him. Instead, I started paying attention. By year 10, I discovered dozens of offshore accounts. I found them accidentally during a charity event when I borrowed his laptop to pull up a donation receipt. His email was open. I saw correspondence about restructuring pension fund investments and redirecting retirement holdings. Even then, I didn't fully understand what I was seeing, but I knew enough to know it was wrong. I knew enough to feel sick. And through it all, he treated me like I was invisible, like I was too stupid to notice, too pampered to care, too dependent to ever question him. He was right about one thing. I had become dependent. I had no money of my own, no career to return to, no independence. He'd made sure of that. Every credit card was in his name. Every account required his signature. I was a bird in a golden cage, and he held the only key. Then came year 12, and everything changed. I found the evidence I'd been unconsciously dreading. Text messages, hotel receipts, photos. Her name was Claudia, and she was his vice president of operations. Beautiful, ambitious, and apparently very comfortable sleeping with her married boss. The affair had been going on for 2 years. 2 years, and I'd been the last to know. Or maybe I'd always known, and just refused to see it. The humiliation wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was realizing that everyone knew. His business partners knew. Our friends knew. The staff at his hotels knew. They all watched me play the devoted wife, while he paraded his mistress through the same rooms, the same restaurants, the same life we'd built together. He didn't even have the decency to hide it anymore. 6 months later, he filed for divorce. He didn't ask me. He didn't discuss it. I received the papers from his lawyer with a cover letter explaining that Victor had moved on and hoped we could handle this maturely and quietly. The prenup was airtight. I'd signed it 15 years ago when I was young and in love and stupid. I would receive $5 million, $5 million, while he kept his empire worth over $3 billion. $5 million, while Claudia moved into what would soon be her mansion. Everyone expected me to fall apart. His lawyers expected me to beg. Claudia probably expected me to make a scene. Victor expected me to sign quietly and disappear into whatever sad little life ex-wives live. And for a few weeks, I let them think exactly that. I played the role perfectly. The devastated, humiliated, helpless wife who had nothing and no one. But here's what none of them knew. Here's the secret I'd been keeping for 3 years. I hadn't forgotten how to read financial documents. I hadn't lost my ability to spot fraud. I'd just been pretending. And while they all thought I was drowning in self-pity, I was actually building the case that would destroy everything Victor had built on lies. It started in year 13, 1 year before he filed for divorce. I'd seen enough suspicious documents by then to know something was deeply wrong. So I did something I hadn't done in over a decade. I called my old accounting firm. I told them I was bored, that I was thinking of doing some volunteer bookkeeping for charities. Could they recommend any courses to refresh my skills? They were thrilled to hear from me. Within weeks, I was taking advanced forensic accounting courses online, using a laptop I'd bought with cash and kept hidden in my gym locker. Then I found Daniel Park. He was a forensic accountant who specialized in tracking white-collar crime. And he'd been investigating Victor's company for years on behalf of a group of pension fund managers who suspected fraud. When I reached out to him through an encrypted email, claiming I might have information, he was skeptical at first. But when I sent him copies of documents I'd photographed from Victor's study, everything changed. Daniel told me what I'd suspected, but hadn't wanted to believe. Victor's entire empire was built on stolen money. The luxury hotels everyone admired, they'd been built with money embezzled from pension funds. Victor had convinced dozens of unions and municipalities to invest their retirement funds in his real estate ventures. Then he'd systematically siphoned off hundreds of millions of dollars, hiding it in offshore accounts, while the original investors lost everything. Thousands of families, teachers, firefighters, nurses, regular working people had lost their retirement savings so Victor could build his monuments to greed. I wanted to vomit when Daniel explained it all. I wanted to scream, but instead, I got to work. I recruited allies slowly, carefully. There was Patricia, the assistant to Victor's CFO, who'd been keeping her own secret records because she knew something was wrong but didn't know who to trust. There was Leonard, a retired FBI agent who'd been wanting to take down Victor for years but never had enough evidence. And there was my own growing expertise, my ability to access Victor's files, to be in rooms where people spoke freely because they thought I was too dumb to understand. For 18 months, I lived a double life. My spa days were actually meetings with Daniel and his team in anonymous conference rooms. My shopping trips to Geneva were really opportunities to access Swiss banking records with help from international investigators. Those charity galas I attended, perfect cover for recording conversations, photographing documents that wealthy men left lying around, gathering evidence. I collected over 50,000 pages of documents. I recorded hundreds of hours of conversations. I built an unbreakable case. The masterstroke came 3 months before the divorce. I'd found the smoking gun, direct evidence that Victor had personally embezzled $800 million, bank transfers with his signature, emails with his personal account, recorded phone calls where he explicitly discussed hiding the money. It was everything we needed, but I needed one more thing. I needed him to incriminate himself one final time. And I needed the evidence to be found in his possession, irrefutably linking him to the crime. So I made a USB drive. On it, I compiled the most damaging evidence: his recorded confessions, bank transfers, communications with co-conspirators. And I made a plan for divorce day. I would give him that drive in a way he'd never suspect, in a way that would seal his fate forever. The morning of the divorce, I woke up at 5. I couldn't sleep anyway. I put on a simple black dress. Nothing designer, nothing that screamed the wealth I was about to lose. I wanted to look defeated. I wanted to look like a woman who'd given up. When I arrived at the courthouse, Victor was already there with his lawyer. Claudia stood beside him, her hand possessively on his arm. She was wearing a ring, my ring, or one very much like it. Victor looked at me with something between pity and contempt. His lawyer smirked. They thought they'd won. In their minds, this was just a formality, a legal procedure to finalize what had already been decided. I was the weak ex-wife, about to sign away any claim to the empire, about to walk away with my pathetic $5 million and whatever scraps of dignity I had left. We went through the motions. Papers were presented. Terms were reviewed. Victor's lawyer made a comment about hoping I'd land on my feet with my settlement. Claudia actually giggled. And through it all, I played my part. I nodded quietly. I looked appropriately devastated. I was the picture of a broken woman. Then, just before we signed, I did something that surprised everyone. I stood up and walked over to Victor. "One last goodbye," I said softly. "For old time's sake." His lawyer looked annoyed, but Victor shrugged. He probably thought it would be amusing, this final gesture from his defeated wife. He probably thought I was going to beg or cry or make some pathetic plea. Instead, I kissed him. It was brief, cold, and calculated. And in that kiss, I passed the USB drive from my mouth to his. I felt him react, felt the surprise, felt him pocket the small device reflexively. When I pulled away, he looked confused. He reached into his pocket, felt the drive, frowned. But then his lawyer was pushing papers toward him, and he dismissed it. Just another random thing in his pocket. Nothing important, nothing that would destroy him. I signed the papers. He signed the papers. By 10:30 that morning, I was officially divorced. Officially worth only $5 million. Officially out of Victor Rothwell's life, forever. I walked out of that courthouse alone, climbed into a taxi, and went home to the small apartment I'd secretly rented 3 months earlier. And then I waited. At noon, exactly 90 minutes after the divorce was finalized, federal agents raided Victor's offices. They raided his homes. They raided his hotels. The timing wasn't coincidental. I'd been working with the FBI and the Securities and Exchange Commission for months. They'd been building their own case, waiting for the right moment. I'd given them everything they needed, and I'd told them exactly when to move. Right after the divorce, so nothing I'd done could be used to invalidate the proceedings. By 2 in the afternoon, every major news outlet was running the story. Real estate mogul Victor Rothwell under federal investigation for massive pension fund fraud. By 3, his assets were frozen, all $3.2 billion of it. By 4, they'd found the USB drive in his pocket, the one he'd been carrying since our kiss. The evidence on that drive, found in his personal possession, became a crucial piece of the prosecution's case. He couldn't claim it had been planted. He couldn't claim he didn't know about it. He'd been carrying it himself. By 6 that evening, Claudia had left him. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She'd thought she was getting a billionaire. Instead, she got a soon-to-be convicted felon with frozen assets and a media circus camped outside his door. She disappeared so fast, you'd think she'd never existed. Within weeks, investigators would discover she'd been complicit in the fraud, signing off on illegal transfers and helping hide money. Her own reckoning was just beginning. The trial took 8 months. I testified for 3 days straight. I walked the jury through every document, every transfer, every lie. I was no longer the quiet wife. I was the forensic accountant I'd once been, the one who understood complex financial structures, the one who could explain exactly how Victor had stolen $800 million from hardworking people's retirement funds. He was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. 25 years. He'd be 80 years old when he got out, if he got out at all. Everything he'd built was seized, liquidated, and returned to his victims. The luxury hotels were sold. The offshore accounts were recovered. The shell companies were dismantled. His empire, built on theft and suffering, was erased. And me, I took that $5 million from the divorce settlement and donated every penny to the victim's fund. I didn't need it. Because what Victor and his lawyers didn't know, what no one knew until the news broke 6 months after his conviction, was that I'd received a whistleblower reward from the government, $180 million for providing the evidence that brought down a massive fraud scheme. $180 million, more money than I'd ever dreamed of having. But here's the thing. I didn't do it for the money. I did it because 10,000 families deserved their retirement back. I did it because Victor thought he was untouchable. I did it because every woman who's ever been called darling and told not to worry her pretty head about complicated things deserves to know that we're not as powerless as men like him want us to believe. I used that money to start a foundation. We help women escape financially abusive marriages. We provide free financial literacy programs. We teach women how to protect themselves, how to document abuse, how to build cases. We make sure no one else has to spend 15 years pretending to be stupid just to survive. I wrote a book about my experience. It became a bestseller. I started a consulting firm that helps investigators track white-collar crime. The irony is almost poetic. Victor thought keeping me financially ignorant would protect him. He thought making me dependent would keep me silent. He thought dismissing my intelligence would make me harmless. Instead, it gave me the perfect cover. I was the invisible woman in the room, the one no one paid attention to, the one who could collect evidence for years without anyone suspecting a thing. His biggest mistake was underestimating me. His second biggest mistake was that USB drive. You see, Victor never knew the real secret. That drive didn't just contain documents. It contained 3 years of recorded conversations, every illegal deal, every bribe, every confession. I'd been recording him the entire time, with a device hidden in my jewelry. That drive held over 200 hours of audio of Victor discussing his crimes in explicit detail, and he carried it in his pocket all day, from the courthouse to the FBI raid, personally delivering the evidence of his own destruction. Where is he now? Still in prison. Appeals denied. Reputation destroyed. Fortune gone. The man who once graced the covers of business magazines now wears an orange jumpsuit. Claudia is working retail somewhere, her own legal troubles finally resolved, but her reputation permanently destroyed. The victims recovered about 80% of their losses. Not everything, but enough to retire with dignity. And me, I'm free in ways I never imagined. Not because of the money, but because I have purpose. I wake up every day knowing I helped 10,000 families get justice. I look in the mirror and see the woman I used to be before I became someone's trophy wife. I see the accountant, the investigator, the fighter. If you're watching this and you feel trapped, if you feel powerless, if someone has ever made you feel small or stupid or invisible, I want you to know something. Your silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. Document everything, learn everything, build your case, because the person dismissing you today might be the person you destroy tomorrow. The sweetest part of revenge isn't the destruction. It's watching karma work through your own carefully prepared hands. It's knowing you didn't just react. You planned, you executed, you won. Victor thought that last kiss was me saying goodbye to him. He had no idea it was me saying hello to justice. If this story moved you, smash that like button right now. Subscribe for more incredible true stories of karma and justice. Share this with someone who needs to know that being underestimated is sometimes your greatest advantage. And comment below, what would you have done in my situation? I read every single comment. Thank you for watching, and remember, patience and preparation will always defeat arrogance and greed. See you in the next one.